The longer a man has been without a relationship, the less you can read him on the surface, and the more you think you understand him, the further you might be from the truth. You see him smiling, functioning, even joking like everyone else. But there's a silence in him that doesn't come from peace. It comes from adaptation. Let me tell you a story. There was a man who hadn't been in a relationship for years, not because he couldn't, but because something in him had quietly changed. At first, it was loneliness, the kind that echoes in empty rooms and long nights, but slowly, that loneliness transformed into something else, something sharper, something quieter. He stopped expecting messages, stopped checking his phone, stopped explaining himself, and one day, without even realizing it, he stopped needing anyone. But here's the part no one talks about. When a man stays alone for too long, he doesn't just become independent. He becomes unfamiliar, even to himself. His love changes, his patience changes, his tolerance disappears. And when someone finally walks into his life again, they don't meet the man he used to be. They meet the man solitude created. So the question is, what really happens to a man the longer he stays alone? And more importantly, what kind of love is he still capable of giving? Part 1. He becomes emotionally self-sufficient, but guarded. Before his solitude, he used to depend on emotional connections to feel grounded. Conversations, affection, shared moments, these were his anchors. But over time, something shifts. He learns to sit with his own thoughts, to process pain alone, to celebrate small wins in silence. At first, it's survival. Then, it becomes a habit. And eventually, it becomes his identity. Like a man who once needed music to fall asleep, but now finds comfort in silence, he adapts. But here's the hidden cost. The more he learns to regulate his emotions alone, the less he feels the need to share them. Not because he's cold, but because he's trained himself not to rely on anyone. It's like building your own shelter in a storm. At some point, you stop looking for rescue. Carl Jung once said, "Loneliness does not come from having no people around, but from being unable to communicate the things that seem important to oneself." And that's exactly where he lives now. He feels deeply, but expresses rarely. He cares, but cautiously. He opens up, but only halfway. Because deep down, he knows something most people don't. Once you've learned how to survive alone, trusting someone again feels like risk, not relief. Reflective takeaway. If you meet a man like this, understand, he's not distant because he doesn't care. He's distant because he's learned that caring too much once cost him something he couldn't afford to lose again. Part 2. He develops high standards, but low tolerance. There was a time when he would overlook flaws just to feel close to someone. He would compromise, adjust, and even silence parts of himself just to make things work. But solitude changes the way a man measures people. When you've spent enough nights alone, you begin to understand your own rhythm. You learn what peace feels like without interruptions. You start recognizing the difference between loneliness and drama disguised as love. And once a man tastes that kind of inner peace, he becomes extremely selective about what he allows into his life. It's not arrogance, it's awareness. Like a man who has walked through chaos and finally found a quiet place. He won't willingly go back to noise. This is where many misunderstand him. They think he's too picky, too hard to please, too distant. But the truth is simpler and deeper. He just refuses to entertain what disturbs his peace. As Friedrich Nietzsche once said, "It is not a lack of love, but a lack of friendship that makes unhappy marriages." And he understands this now more than ever. So he observes more than he speaks. He listens more than he reacts. He walks away faster than before. Because he's no longer looking for just attraction. He's looking for alignment. And if he doesn't find it, he doesn't argue, chase, or convince. He simply withdraws. Real-life analogy. Think of a man who has lived in a noisy city his whole life and then moves to the mountains. The silence becomes addictive. Now, even a small disturbance feels overwhelming. That's what emotional peace does to a man. Reflective. Takeaway. If you come into his life, understand this. He's not expecting perfection, but he is expecting peace. And if your presence feels heavier than his solitude, he will choose solitude every single time. Part 3. He stops chasing love and starts protecting his energy. There was a version of him that believed love was something you pursued. He would try harder, give more, prove himself, stay longer than he should, just to keep someone. But time and distance from relationships rewired that belief. Now he sees something most people miss. Not every connection is worth the emotional cost, so he becomes different. He doesn't text endlessly trying to keep interest alive. He doesn't over-explain his intentions. He doesn't perform just to be chosen, because he no longer wants to be selected. He wants to be understood, and that changes everything. Like a man who once spent money recklessly but then went through financial hardship, he becomes careful, intentional, almost strategic with what he invests in. His energy becomes his currency, and he spends it wisely. This is where many people misread him. They think he's lost interest quickly. They assume he's emotionally unavailable. They feel like he's not trying enough. But what they don't see is this. He is trying, just not in the way he used to. He's observing consistency. He's measuring effort. He's watching how someone shows up when things are inconvenient. Because he knows now, words are cheap, but patterns never lie. As Sun Tzu taught in The Art of War, every battle is won before it is fought. And in love, he no longer fights blindly. He studies first, he protects first, he chooses carefully, because he understands something deeply uncomfortable. The wrong person doesn't just waste your time, they slowly drain your sense of self. Reflective takeaway. If you meet a man like this, don't mistake his calm for indifference. He's not detached, he's disciplined. And if he lets you in, it's not by accident. It's because you've proven you won't cost him his peace. Part 4. He learns to love differently, or not at all. By the time a man has spent years without a relationship, something profound happens. He stops seeing love as a necessity and starts seeing it as a choice, and that changes the entire way he connects. Before, love may have felt like urgency, a need to fill a space, a desire to not be alone, but now he's already faced that emptiness, sat with it, understood it. So when he looks at love again, he's not asking, "Do I need this?" He's asking, "Does this add something real to my life?" And if the answer isn't clear, he walks away. Not because he's incapable of love, but because he refuses to dilute it. This is the paradox of his solitude. He becomes both harder to love and more powerful in the way he loves. When he finally chooses someone, it's not impulsive. It's not based on loneliness or attraction alone. It's intentional. Like a man who has been starving doesn't just eat anything anymore. He becomes careful about what he consumes, because he knows the wrong thing can harm him more than hunger ever did. Albert Camus once wrote, "In the depth of winter, I finally learned that within me there lay an invincible summer." That's who he becomes. A man who found warmth within himself and now refuses to settle for anything that feels cold. But here's the truth most people aren't ready to hear. Some men don't come back from that solitude. They don't re-enter love easily. They don't open up the same way again. Not because they're broken, but because they've built a life where love is no longer required to feel whole. Real-life reflection. You might meet him and feel like there's a wall, but it's not a wall, it's a filter, and only those who bring peace, depth, and honesty ever make it through. So, if you've been wondering what happens to a man the longer he stays without a relationship, now you know. He doesn't just become single, he becomes selective, self-contained, unpredictable. He becomes someone who no longer fears being alone. And that makes him incredibly difficult to hold on to, but incredibly meaningful to be chosen by. And maybe the real question isn't just about him. Maybe it's about you. If someone like this walked into your life, would you bring peace or pressure? Would you understand his silence or try to break it? Because a man who has learned to live without love will never stay where love feels like a burden. He will only stay where it feels like home.